Sean Strickland has had one of the most impactful title reigns in UFC history, despite him only being champion for a few months. Why? Many reasons, but the main one being his realness. He doesn't give a fuck. People can only respect fakes so much, but they can relate to something real all day. And we all know there's a whole lot of fake in the world right now. From social media to societal standards, there's a lot of things many people disagree with. Now more than ever, people seem lost, misguided, and without purpose. He's utilizing the platform UFC gives to speak out about what he feels is true, and does so without a care about what people think about him or what the repercussions will be.
I think Dylan's a piece of shit, dude. He's somebody I like to That would be so fun, actually.
For this reason, in the past year, he's amassed one of the most loyal UFC followings we've seen in a long time. Sean is a walking paradox. That's another reason he's such an interesting character. On one hand, he's loud, abrasive, aggressive, threatening. But on the other, he's completely vulnerable, open, and not afraid to tell people about the worst things that have happened to him. Despite his harsh opinions, he's not afraid to tell people who he actually is. And in a world that's full of fake people and media, someone being truthful attracts people like moths to a flame.
Like, people don't give a fuck about me fighting.
You keep saying that, and yet people are going to buy your fight to watch you fight.
But it's also the message I do. Like, you take George St. Pierre, that fucking guy, one of the greatest fighters in the world, greatest Canadian fighters in the world. George St. Pierre ever done anything to jeopardize his Chinese check mark from Nike? Never.
No, never.
Never. You know, so it's like, yeah, people do like me to fight and they want me to win, but at the end of the day, bro, it's just a voice that they don't have, you know?
For sure.
He's not like typical UFC champions, who are extremely strategic, who watch tape and game plan for fights. He's the complete opposite.
Nah, motherfucker. How long was his back against that cage for?
This is partly why so many people wrote him off in his fight against Izzy. Izzy will pick him apart. He may not study tape or game plan for fights, but he's completely obsessed with the art of fighting. Sparring, defense, positioning, finding openings. Not in a cerebral way, like maybe Izzy is, but in a way that has developed naturally as a defense mechanism from years on years of hard sparring. For most, sparring is a means to sharpen their tools. Sparring to Sean is his outlet. It's his therapy.
I'm little. Come on, fucking pussy. I'm ready to fucking die here, you. I wanna fucking die.
Where most other fighters are fighting to pay their bills or build a career, Sean does it simply because it is the only thing that keeps him physically and mentally sane.
Let me tell you one thing. Hate to me, you guys, is my natural state. I love to hate shit. I love to hate someone with such a passion that you want to fucking take a knife and just fucking cut through their throat. It feels so fucking good to hate somebody.
It's hard to beat someone who is truly obsessed in that way. If he wasn't in the UFC, he'd probably be dead, in jail, or somewhere in between. But because he found fighting and training, it's turned him into one of the most skillful fighters in the world. Not something you would guess from watching an interview with the guy.
Let's fight again. Don't knock me out this time. You can still
But it goes to show, obsession of the craft trumps all. Sean Strickland's look at a UFC title was looking slim to none around this time last year. He only fought once in 2021, beating Uriah Hall, which would set him up with fights in 2022 against Jared Cannonier, which he'd end up losing to via decision. Nearly 6 months later, he'd take on UFC newcomer Alex Pereira, which also ended in disaster. He'd get knocked out in the first round in brutal fashion, which ended up springboarding Pereira to a title shot later that year. After coming off 2 straight losses, at this point, I don't think Sean ever thought he'd get a title shot. Sean had no choice but to fight someone below him, which are very risky matchups. Fighters that didn't necessarily have any pull, but were savages. A lose-lose situation for Sean going into them. He ended up getting 2 victories over Nasruddin Imavov as well as Abus Magomedov, putting him back into the conversation to fight one of the top contenders. 2 fights ago, things seemed like they could have gone in the very wrong direction. But all of a sudden, the perfect window of opportunity appeared for him.
I mean, depending on what type.
Have you ever interviewed Izzy?
Yeah.
Okay, how's that? Do you guys speak Cantonese together? How's that? You guys go out to lunch afterwards and use chopsticks?
At the time, the UFC themselves didn't want to make this fight, as Sean was a problematic character, and putting him in a position to get a title shot was something they wanted to avoid at all costs. But Izzy pushed the matchmakers to make the fight, and it happened. At this point, Sean Strickland's star power began building. Cameras began being shoved in his face, his gym started becoming filled with interviewers, and for the first time in his life, people actually wanted to know his story. They actually cared about what he had to say, and he took full advantage of that. In the build-up to the fight, Sean took this opportunity to pour his mind out. He exposed seemingly every champion on the roster, calling them out for things a lot of people have thought but haven't vocalized. That is Sean's superpower, saying things that everyone thought but nobody had the balls to say.
But with Izzy, it's starting not to be funny anymore. Because as I'm starting to understand Izzy and his love of his dog, peanut butter and all, I'm starting to realize that like he could have a form of like mental like there's something fucking wrong with this guy.
Or just expressing every intrusive thought that comes into his brain, however you want to look at it. He attacked the authenticity of people like Izzy, Sean O'Malley, Colby Covington, Ian Gary, and many others. This, along with spilling his heart out about things he's personally been through, speaking on problems we all go through today, and his experience in life, built up a raging fan base of people who relate to him and respect his authenticity. Izzy was one of UFC's biggest superstars for years and years up to this point. In just a few months, Sean had completely overtaken him as the fan favorite and slingshotted himself into superstar status. There is a funny thing in the fight game, and in sports in general, called momentum. You can just feel when it's someone's time to shine, and despite all setbacks or obstacles, they get the job done. This was Sean Strickland's time. Sean went into that fight with a different mentality. Everything he'd experienced in life up to this moment came to a head. At this point in Sean's life, he'd been through everything you can go through. He was at a point where his back was against the wall. There wasn't much that you could do to him that hasn't been done already. And because of this, he walked into this fight with zero fear. Izzy didn't scare him, and it showed.
Listen, bro, you're gonna break a fucking nail. Calm down.
I'll break your fucking face. I'll break your fucking face.
As a result, he walked through one of the most dominant champions in UFC history with ease. In the first round, he sends the audience into a frenzy by knocking down and almost finishing the fight. And he ends up going on to dictate the fight for the rest of the 4 rounds. Sean Strickland walked in that arena that night as one of the biggest underdogs ever, and walked out as the new UFC middleweight champion. Obviously, this sent Sean's already rising status into superstardom. But as his character suggests, he never let it get to his head.
Guys, I already broke my belt, but I have a solution. Good as new.
He continued his rise to becoming the biggest star in the UFC over the next few months, continuing to do interviews, showing his personality, telling more of his story, and people ate it up. The reason most people aren't as real as Sean is because by the time most people get to this point and find success, they cling to it. They do whatever it takes to keep it. They have something to lose. They let other people's opinions dictate what they do and say. Sean was the complete opposite. He doesn't care about any of that stuff. Fighting, to him, is as pure as it gets.
Fucking not so good, man. Now I'm just trying to get the head right to go try to kill a man for 25 minutes. That's like the last couple days, just trying to get your fucking head right to go in there and fucking be ready to die for 25 minutes. So
A UFC belt won't define who he is or how he acts.
I was excited because I won, but this fucking belt, means nothing. It means nothing.
Over the course of the next few months, a lot of things took place in Sean's life. He'd done multiple viral interviews. He made headlines for altercations he got into, made more headlines for opinions he has. Leading into the build-up to his next fight, Sean became the biggest star in the UFC at that time. On January 20th, he was slated to make his first title defense against South African Dricus du Plessis. This really was a pinnacle moment for Sean's career. If he beats Dricus, his superstar status gets sent to another level. However, if he loses, everything he's built over the last year comes crumbling down. The fight ended up being very close, many people thinking Sean did enough to win. But ultimately, after getting headbutted mid-fight, Sean began having difficulty seeing. Blood was pouring over his eye, and he slowed down significantly over the next rounds. He ended up losing a decision to lose his belt, but ultimately handled it with humility, making good on his promise to not let the belt define him. And just like that, this run he had been on over the last year had come to a close.
Once that fucking eye opened up, I don't know how it opened up. Headbutt. Yeah, once that eye opened up, man, I just couldn't see. Welcome to fighting. This kind of sucks, to get beat, I don't mind getting beat. Take a headbutt, get my eye blind,
And you still have 135. Dana did press conference, 135.
I had it 2-2 going into the last round, and I thought Strickland won the last round.
Over the last year, cameras were shoved in his face constantly. People finally found out who he was, what he had to say, and for the first time, people took an interest into his life. Just like that, his moment had come to an end. And now there's a new champion in the spotlight. Regardless whether he's champ or not, he's earned the respect of the entire UFC fan base and made an impact in the short time he was in the spotlight. Will he ever become UFC champion again? It's possible, but it seems like the UFC has other plans. Regardless of the answer to that question, there will never be a champion quite as real as him. If there's one message that we can take from all of this, it's to just be real.